In the sprawling, restless city of San Francisco lived a young woman named Mia Reynolds. To the wealthy patrons she served at the 24-hour diner on Mission Street and the hurried crowd she navigated, she was nearly invisible, just another exhausted face trying to survive. What they did not see was that each night, when her double shift ended at 2 in the morning, she did not return to an apartment. She returned to a 2008 Honda Civic parked behind the laundromat, where her 8-year-old daughter Emma slept on the back seat wrapped in donated blankets, and where Mia herself washed her clothes and her body in the industrial sink when the attendant stepped out for cigarette breaks. Her entire life fit inside a weathered backpack. A change of clothes. 2 shirts that no longer held their original color. Underwear she hand-washed in gas station bathrooms at 3 in the morning, timed perfectly to avoid suspicion. A library card. A vaccination record for Emma. Photographs of a life that no longer existed. The backpack was leather once, before the seams split open and Mia patched them with duct tape in a dozen places. She moved through the world taking up as little space as possible, shoulders bent forward, eyes down, speaking only when spoken to, her voice barely a whisper, like a candle in the wind. The scars mapped across her back told a geography of pain that no one ever saw. Long marks running in every direction like a map of hell. Some were thin and white, faded to almost nothing. Others were darker, newer, raised slightly above her skin. They were remnants of Douglas Hale's fists, of his rage, of the 7 years she had spent believing that love was supposed to hurt. She had finally fled with nothing but her daughter and the clothes on her skin. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of invisible living. 3 years of $2 diner meals eaten standing up in the kitchen. 3 years of watching Emma sleep in a car and feeling the weight of complete failure pressing down on her chest every single night. On a February night, the blizzard turned the streets of San Francisco into white walls. Snow fell so thick that visibility dropped to almost nothing. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing through the empty streets like a blade wrapped in ice. Mia's 2008 Honda Civic, the only shelter she and Emma had, began to struggle on the frozen highway outside the city. The engine coughed. Sputtered. Died. She turned the key again. Nothing but silence. Then nothing at all. She sat gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her breath coming in small clouds. The heater had stopped working 10 minutes ago. Emma was shivering in the back seat, buried under 3 blankets that together were not enough. The phone on the dashboard had died an hour before, the battery indicator had glowed red, then nothing. The gas tank read empty. And in her jacket pocket, Mia carried exactly $78. $78, all she had left in the world. On the passenger seat lay a white envelope. The words were stamped in red ink, "Final Notice." The letter inside demanded $125,000 within 7 days. Medical bills from Emma's accident 6 months ago. A car had hit them in a crosswalk. Emma had suffered a broken arm, a severe concussion, internal bleeding. The hospital had fought for her life for 8 hours and 15 minutes while Mia sat in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and despair, praying to a God she no longer believed in. The surgery had cost $200,000. The insurance company had denied coverage. The hospital had sent letters. Then the debt collectors came. Now the final notice lay on her seat like a death sentence. Mia picked up the letter with trembling hands. 7 days. $125,000. The paper felt thin and fragile, like it might dissolve if she held it too hard. She crumpled it instead, then smoothed it out again. What did it matter? The money did not exist. It would never exist. She could work 1,000 double shifts and never earn enough to cover it. She could sell her body, sell her blood, sell every organ that kept her alive, and it would not be enough. The sound of engines approached through the blizzard. Deep, powerful, purposeful. Mia's entire body went rigid. Her heart stopped, then resumed beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw headlights cutting through the snow. Not one vehicle. Multiple. Moving slowly, deliberately, in formation. Black SUVs emerging from the white walls like ghosts materializing. They pulled behind her Honda Civic and stopped. The engine shut down in perfect sequence. Silence fell. The kind of silence that is not peaceful but heavy, weighted, dangerous. Doors opened. Footsteps on the snow. Multiple sets. Heavy boots. Multiple voices, low and calm, coordinating something in the wind. Mia's mind raced. Douglas. It had to be Douglas. He had found them. After 3 years of hiding, he had finally found them. She turned to look at Emma. Her daughter was awake now, eyes wide, terrified, her small body pressed against the window. Mia reached back and took her hand. Cold. So cold. She squeezed it, trying to communicate something. I love you. Be brave. It will be okay. None of it was true, but that was what mothers did. They lied to their children to keep them from screaming. A man appeared at the driver's side window. Tall. So tall that his shoulders filled the entire frame. He wore a cashmere coat in charcoal black, worth more than everything Mia owned combined, more than a year of her old rent, more than her dreams. The coat was expensive in a way that hurt to look at. His hair was dark, barely touched by silver at the temples. His face was sharp, angular, with a scar running from the outer corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone like a blade cut by another blade. His eyes were storm gray and bottomless. When he looked at her through the glass, Mia felt something primal in her body recognize danger. He knocked on the window. Not threatening. Just knocked. A sound that cut through the wind and the silence and the pounding of her own heartbeat. Mia rolled down the window. The cold rushed in immediately, stealing her breath. The man looked at her. Truly looked at her. Not past her. Not through her. At her. Engine? His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Like something you could build a foundation on. Dead, Mia whispered. How long have you been here? Maybe an hour. My phone died. She stopped. What was the point of explaining? He was about to hurt her. Or take her. Or both. But the man did not move toward her. He simply stood there, the wind pulling at his coat, snow collecting in his dark hair. Your daughter? In the back. She's cold. Please, if you're going to, Mia's voice broke. Please just make it quick. Something flickered in his eyes. Not kindness. Mia had learned that kindness was not something men like this possessed. But something else. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. He stepped away from the window and opened the back door. Emma cried out, pressing deeper into the seat. It is okay, the man said. His voice was different now. Gentler. Like a man soothing a lost child. We are going to help you. What is your name? Emma looked at Mia. Mia nodded. Emma, her daughter said, barely audible. Emma, I am Aleandro Bianchi. I am going to pick you up and carry you to a warm place. Is that all right? Emma nodded. Aleandro Bianchi removed his cashmere coat and wrapped it around Emma's small frame like she was made of glass. She disappeared inside it, swallowed by fabric that smelled like expensive cologne and safety. He lifted her with ease, holding her against his chest. 2 other men in dark suits appeared beside the car, one with olive skin and a square jaw, the other with a scar on his neck. Bruno and Dario, though Mia did not know their names yet. Get the mother, Aleandro said. Not a request. A command. But there was no cruelty in it. Bruno opened Mia's door. The cold poured in. She stumbled out, her legs nearly giving way. Bruno caught her elbow, steadying her. His grip was firm but not unkind. He guided her toward the lead SUV, a black vehicle with dark-tinted windows that seemed to absorb light. As they drove, Mia sat in the back seat staring at her own trembling hands. Emma was in front with Aleandro Bianchi. She could hear her daughter's voice, small and uncertain, asking questions. Why did the man have a scar? Where were they going? Was Mommy okay? Your mother is safe, Aleandro said. My men will make sure of that. The drive took 40 minutes. The blizzard began to ease. The snow fell softer, less like a weapon. Mia watched the city transform outside the window, warehouses giving way to neighborhoods, neighborhoods giving way to something else. Wealth. Real wealth. The kind that lived behind gates and stone walls. The SUV pulled through wrought iron gates that opened without anyone touching them. A driveway curved through grounds that must have been acres. At the end stood a mansion. Not just large. Enormous. Lit from inside, warm and golden, like something from a dream. The sound of her own breathing filled the silence. The whoosh of the wind outside. The soft closing of the SUV doors as they stopped. What Mia Reynolds did not know, as she stepped out into the snow and looked up at that mansion, was that the simple act of kindness she was about to witness would set in motion events that no one could have predicted. Within 1 week, 15 limousines would arrive at her door. Within 2 weeks, 2 predators would close in, determined to destroy her. And the man standing before her, the man whose name whispered through San Francisco's underworld like a curse, would become the only thing standing between her and complete annihilation. Drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us rewind, back to the beginning, to understand how a homeless mother and a mafia king arrived at this frozen moment on a February night. 12 hours earlier, Mia Reynolds was still invisible. 3 days before the blizzard, before the black SUVs emerged from the snow, before Mia Reynolds understood that her life was about to splinter into a before and an after, Aleandro Bianchi sat in the mahogany darkness of his restaurant and felt something crack open in his chest. Bianchi's occupied the 3rd floor of a building in North Beach that no one asked questions about. The elevator required a key. The windows faced inward, toward a courtyard only the owners knew existed. Inside, the air hung thick with garlic and rosemary and the weight of 1,000 conversations that had never left these walls. White tablecloths draped each table like snow. Candlelight flickered in crystal holders. Jazz played softly from speakers no one could locate, something about autumn leaves, something mournful and beautiful and wrong for a room where men discussed things that could not be undone. Aleandro sat in the private booth at the back, the one where the mahogany panels rose to the ceiling and the lighting dimmed to a place between shadow and sight. Across from him sat Bruno and Dario, men who had worked for him for 15 and 12 years respectively. Their voices were low, measured, the cadence of professionals discussing inventory and territory the way other men discussed weather. The shipment from Marseille arrives Wednesday, Bruno said. His hands lay flat on the table, palms down. Everything about Bruno was controlled. Everything about him was a weapon kept sheathed. Aleandro nodded. He was not listening. His attention had drifted past them, toward the main dining room, toward a family that had just been seated near the window. A woman pushed a wheelchair. Her movements were careful, practiced, the way someone moves when they have done something 10,000 times and 10,000 times learned not to expect it to become easier. In the wheelchair sat a boy, 17 years old, his legs still and angular beneath the dark fabric of his jeans. His face was pale but not weak. His eyes tracked the room with intelligence and something else, something that looked like rage wearing the mask of acceptance. The boy's hand rested on the armrest. His fingers were long. An artist's fingers, maybe. Or a musician's. Aleandro watched the mother, dark hair, tired smile, the particular exhaustion that comes from being the only thing holding someone together, order for both of them. The boy said nothing. His lips moved slightly, but no sound reached across the dining room. The mother leaned close, nodded, squeezed his shoulder. Aleandro. Bruno's voice cut through. The territories. We need your call. Dario waited. Both men understood they had lost him somewhere across the room, somewhere near a family they did not recognize and had no reason to care about. Aleandro did not look away from the boy. The boy felt it, he turned his head slightly, and their eyes met. Dark eyes. Intelligent. Drowning. Something moved in Aleandro's ribcage like a blade through water. Like a wound reopening. "Give the eastern corridor to Santini," he said quietly. "He's earned it. Bruno, I want you handling the Marseille shipment personally. And Dario," he paused. "Dario, you're going to help me with something else tonight." "What something?" Bruno asked. Aleandro did not answer. He was already standing, already moving toward the kitchen with the kind of decisiveness that meant the conversation was finished. In the walk-in refrigerator, surrounded by hanging meats and the hiss of cold air, Aleandro stood alone for exactly 90 seconds. His hands clenched. His jaw tightened. For one moment, he was 8 years old again, watching his father's fist descend toward his mother's face. For one moment, he was that child swearing into the darkness that no one would ever break like he had been broken. He emerged. He found the owner, a man named Giuseppe who had worked for him since Bianchi's opened 15 years ago. "The family near the window," Aleandro said. "The mother and the boy. Send them whatever they want. Everything on the house." And Giuseppe, he handed him a stack of cash, $500 bills. "Put this on the table for her. Tell her it is from a friend of the restaurant. Tell her no one should have to earn their dignity." Giuseppe's hands trembled slightly as he took the money. In 15 years, he had never seen Aleandro Bianchi's face look like this. The mother felt the gesture before she understood it. She looked up, searching the room for the source of the kindness. But Aleandro had returned to the booth. Bruno was asking him questions he did not answer. Dario was watching his profile with the careful attention of a man trying to solve a puzzle that had no solution. Later, as Aleandro drove through the rain-slicked streets back to his penthouse, he thought about the boy's eyes. He thought about paralysis, not just the kind that lives in the spinal cord, but the kind that lives in the soul, the kind that whispers that you are broken beyond repair and that broken things do not deserve to exist. He thought about his mother's grave in a cemetery in North Beach. He had not visited in 3 years. Meanwhile, in a diner called Murphy's, 6 blocks away from the ocean and 1,000 miles away from mahogany booths and candlelight, Mia Reynolds was learning what it meant to be invisible to everyone except the people who wanted to hurt her. The diner sat on a corner where the city grew tired. The neon sign flickered, a pink flamingo that was missing half its beak. Inside, the linoleum was worn through in high-traffic patterns. The coffee machine hissed like something wounded. The clock on the wall showed 11:19 p.m., and Mia had 5 hours and 13 minutes left on her second shift. Her feet lived in a state of permanent pain. Her lower back screamed with the particular ache of 8 years of standing on concrete while wearing shoes that cost $12. But what Mia carried that no one could see, what lived beneath the collar of her uniform and the careful way she held her shoulders, was a map of scars. Scars running in every direction like a topography of hell. They formed patterns, fists, belt buckles, the edge of a boot. They told a story no one would ever read. She carried 2 plates to table 6. A trucker in a stained cap. A man in work boots whose hands smelled like diesel fuel. They did not look at her face. Men at this hour rarely did. At 1:35 a.m., a customer came in who made the difference between a survivable night and a night that would break something already fractured. He was drunk. Not falling down drunk, but the kind of drunk that comes with rage, the kind that made his movements jerky and his words sharp as broken glass. He ordered a burger and coffee, and when Mia brought it, he grabbed her wrist. His fingers closed around her skin like a vice. His nails dug. She felt the sting, felt the immediate flash of muscle memory. Douglas's hands had felt exactly like this, demanding, claiming, convinced they had the right to leave marks. "Smile," the man said. His breath smelled like whiskey and cigarettes. "You're too pretty to look so sad." Mia froze. The coffee cup trembled in her other hand. The scalding liquid sloshed, close to spilling. Her throat closed. Her vision narrowed to a pinpoint. She was back in that apartment on Marino Street, back in the darkness, back in the place where Douglas's voice had said things that made her skin crawl. The cook, a man named James who had worked at Murphy's for 23 years and had seen everything the night shift could produce, appeared from the kitchen. He did not yell. He simply placed his massive hand on the drunk man's shoulder and said, "Let her go." Something in James's voice, something final, something that said this was not a request, made the drunk man release her. Mia walked to the bathroom. Her hand shook so badly she could barely turn the lock. She stood in front of the mirror and lifted her uniform shirt. In the fluorescent light, the scars were stark, brutal, a landscape of violence written across her skin. She did not remember when they had stopped hurting. She did not remember becoming someone who could look at them without flinching. She thought of Emma in the back seat of the Civic, probably awake now, probably wondering why her mother took so long. She thought of the letter on the dashboard. The letter that said $125,000 in 7 days. 7 days. 168 hours. In that time, the city would not stop. The sun would not stop. Emma would still need food, still need shoes, still need to exist. When Mia returned to the diner, she clocked out at 6:31 a.m. She had earned $12 in tips. $12. She had a total of $78 in her bank account, $78 to exist until her next paycheck in 8 days. The math did not work. It had never worked. But she had learned to move through the world as if the math might somehow change. The Civic was parked in the employee lot, under a flickering streetlight that cast everything in a sickly amber. Emma sat curled in the back seat, her book bag clutched to her chest like a life preserver. She was 8 years old and already knew what most adults never learned: how to make herself small, how to ask for nothing, how to wait without complaint. "Hi, baby," Mia said, sliding into the driver's seat. "Did you sleep okay?" Emma nodded, but her eyes were asking a different question. "Are we safe? Are we going to be okay?" "It's Friday," Mia said, and she heard the false brightness in her voice. "We can get groceries. Maybe some pasta. Your favorite." Emma smiled. It was a smile built on a foundation of hope that her mother was slowly teaching her to doubt. Mia started the engine. As she pulled out of the parking lot, her eyes caught on the dashboard, where the final notice letter Saturday. 5 days remaining. 5 days until the debt collectors took the last thing she owned. What she did not know, as she drove through the pre-dawn streets toward a temporary shelter that would let them stay until 8 in the morning, was that 3 blocks away, in a penthouse overlooking the city, a man was awake and unable to sleep. Aleandro Bianchi stood on his balcony, looking out at the lights of San Francisco, and thought about boys with paralyzed legs and mothers who were not strong enough to protect their children. He thought about the swearing he had done at age 8, the oath he had made over his mother's grave, that one day he would have enough power to make sure that no one who was powerless ever stayed powerless. One day, he had thought. Someday, he would meet someone worth saving. He did not know that someday would arrive in exactly 72 hours. He did not know that it would come in the form of a woman in a dying Honda Civic, with $78 to her name and a daughter sleeping in the back seat, driving toward a future that was about to collide with his past. He did not know that the sound of the blizzard beginning to build in the distance, the first whisper of winter turning violent, was the opening note of a symphony that would destroy 2 predators and remake everything he believed about what it meant to be alive. The morning broke gray and cold across San Francisco, the kind of winter day that feels like the city is holding its breath. Mia Reynolds sat in the employee break room of Sal's Diner on Mission Street, counting the bills from her morning shift with trembling fingers. $12.37 in crumpled bills and scattered change. Added to the $65 she'd hidden in her jacket pocket, that made $77.37. Not 78. She recounted. Still $77.37. The difference between having enough and not having enough often came down to cents. Emma's school had called that morning, her voice on the phone bright and casual. The 5th grade class was taking a field trip to the Science Museum in 3 weeks, and the deposit was $200. Due today. Emma had been accepted into the gifted program, a small miracle Mia had not thought possible for a girl who'd spent most of the year sleeping in a car. The teacher's voice had softened when Mia said she'd need to call back. I understand these things are challenging for families. But Emma is such a brilliant child. We'd hate for her to miss this opportunity. Mia stared at the $77.37. She thought about Emma's face that morning when she dropped her at school, the girl's backpack stuffed with library books she checked out 3 at a time, her eyes bright with the kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. Emma wanted to know everything. Emma wanted to see the museum's planetarium, had asked her mother 3 times if the stars were really as far away as they seemed, and if you could get there if you drove long enough. Outside the break room window, the sky had turned the color of old concrete. The weather report that morning had mentioned a winter storm building from the coast, snow expected by evening, possible white oat conditions by nightfall. Mia had heard it while heating water for the instant oatmeal they shared. She'd made a mental calculation: pick up Emma from after-school care by 6 p.m., or face a $50 late fee she could not afford. That made $127.37 she owed in the next 12 hours. And somewhere on the dashboard of her Honda Civic, a letter in red ink and all capitals: final notice. $125,000. 7 days to respond, or proceedings would begin. She had 6 days now. The clock on the break room wall read 11:47. Sal was already talking about cutting her afternoon shift short because of the storm. Mia's stomach twisted. Every hour lost was $3.50 gone, tuition for Emma's future shrinking by the minute. At 12:30, while Mia was clearing table 9, a black town car pulled up to the curb outside the diner. Through the window, she watched the rear passenger door open. A young man in a wheelchair was carefully positioned on the sidewalk, a heavy blanket tucked around his legs. Even from a distance, she could see his face was pale, drawn tight with the kind of pain that lived under skin and bone. His nurse, a woman in scrubs, was beside him, checking something on his phone. The boy looked to be 17, with dark hair and eyes that, even from across the street, carried the weight of someone who had seen suffering up close. Mia watched him for only a second before returning to her tables. She had learned long ago that looking too closely at other people's pain could unmake her own careful walls. By 2 p.m., the wind had picked up. Snow was beginning to fall in sparse, urgent flakes. Sal stood by the front window, watching the street. Storm's coming faster than they said. You should head out early, pick up your daughter. Roads will be hell in an hour. Mia had $42 now. She'd made 28 in tips across 3 tables. Still short. Always short. She untied her apron, grabbed her coat, a grey thing that had belonged to someone else before the Salvation Army, and headed toward her Civic in the parking lot. The engine coughed when she turned the key. Coughed again. Started on the 3rd try, a sound like something breaking inside. The gas gauge showed a needle hovering just above empty. She had enough to reach Emma's school, to reach the laundromat where they'd spend the night, and then she would coast until the tank ran dry and ask Marco, the assistant manager from the gas station 2 blocks away, to give her a discount on $5 of fuel. Again. The streets were already slick when she merged onto Mission Street. Snow fell harder now, accumulating on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Traffic thickened, brake lights glowing red in the gathering white. Mia gripped the wheel, feeling the car's uncertainty in every bump and curve. The Civic was 25 years old and held together by prayer and the kind of mechanical luck that could run out at any moment. At a red light on Mission, another vehicle pulled up beside her. A black town car, the same one from outside the diner. The rear window lowered. Through the falling snow, Mia saw the young man in the wheelchair again. His face had changed, something was wrong. His breathing was shallow, his hand gripping the side of the door. The nurse was leaning forward frantically, speaking rapid words Mia couldn't hear over the wind and the engine noise. The light turned green. The town car didn't move. Cars behind him began honking. The driver got out, helpless, looking toward his employer somewhere Mia couldn't see. The young man's eyes were starting to lose focus. Mia pulled her car to the side of the road, shut off the engine, and ran through the snow to the town car in 3 quick strides. "Is he okay?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "Panic attack? Let him breathe. Look at me, kid. Look at my eyes." She leaned into the open window, her voice steady though her hands were shaking. "You're okay. Just breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Come on. In for 4. The young man's eyes found hers. He breathed in, held, breathed out. His color was starting to return. Again. In. Hold. Out. "You're doing great." They breathed together for 2 minutes while the nurse stared at Mia with the expression of someone who had witnessed a small miracle. The traffic around them was honking, angry, urgent, but Mia didn't move. She stayed with the boy until his breathing steadied, until his hand released the doorframe, until something like calm returned to his face. "I'm okay," he said finally, his voice thin. "I'm okay now." "Okay," Mia said. She took a step back, the cold air hitting her like a slap. "Just take it easy, all right? Rest when you need to." "Thank you," the nurse said, tears gathering in her eyes. "How did you know what to do?" Mia was already turning away. "I was a CNA for 6 months. Before." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't say, "Before my daughter's accident, before we lost everything, before I became nobody." She returned to her Civic and pulled back into traffic, her heart still hammering. In her rearview mirror, she watched the town car pull away slowly, carefully. The young man was looking out the window at her, watching her go. By 5:45, snow was falling like the sky itself was collapsing. Visibility had dropped to maybe 30 feet. Mia picked up Emma from after-school care at the community center, her daughter already in her jacket, backpack slung over her thin shoulders. Emma was 8 and had learned not to complain about waiting, not to ask questions about where they were sleeping tonight, not to hope for things like field trips to science museums. "Can we go to the laundromat early?" Emma asked as they pulled onto the highway. "I'm cold." "Soon, baby. First we need to get some groceries. Maybe some pasta. Your favorite." Emma smiled. It was a smile built on a foundation of hope that her mother was slowly teaching her to doubt. Mia started the engine. As she pulled out of the parking lot, her eyes caught the dashboard, where the final notice letter sat propped against the steering column. 5 days remaining. The legal language was blurred from being read too many times. 5 days until the debt collectors took the last thing she owned, which was essentially nothing, but they would take it anyway. The snow fell heavier. The Civic's wipers beat a futile rhythm. Mia merged onto Highway 101, heading south toward the laundromat that would let them stay until 8 in the morning. 3 blocks away from her current location, in a penthouse overlooking the city, Aleandro stood on his balcony watching the storm roll in. He was 42 years old, built like a boxer who had stopped boxing but kept the muscle, his dark hair silvered at the temples. His suit was black Valentino, the kind that cost more than some people's rent. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of his rise through San Francisco's underworld, a rise that had been relentless and absolute. But Aleandro wasn't thinking about his empire or his power or the 300 men who answered to him with religious devotion. He was thinking about boys with paralyzed legs and mothers who were not strong enough to protect their children. He thought about the swearing he had done at age 8, the oath he had made over his mother's grave in the rain, that someday, somehow, he would have enough power to make sure that no one who was powerless ever stayed powerless. One day. Someday. The words he'd whispered into her cold forehead as they lowered her into the ground. His phone rang. Bruno's voice, quick and efficient, "Boss. Marco had an episode this afternoon. A woman helped him. Just stopped on the street, calmed him down, asked for nothing." Aleandro's hand tightened on the balcony railing. "What woman?" "Didn't leave her name. Called herself Mia. Young, maybe 30, dark hair. Driving an old Civic." Marco says she recognized his pain before she even knew who he was. The penthouse was so high up that the sounds of the storm barely reached Aleandro. He could see the highways below turning white, cars slowing to crawls in the gathering dark. Someone was down there in this. Someone was driving toward a collision with fate, and fate was a thing Aleandro Bianchi had learned to steer when he could. "Find her," he said. "I want to know everything. Where she works, where she sleeps, who she runs from. Everything. Already on it." License plate came back registered to a Mia Reynolds. Former address in Oakland, no current residence on file. But boss, there's something else. Within the last year, she's been flagged in 3 separate police reports. Her ex trying to locate her. It's not safe what she's running from. Aleandro was quiet. He was thinking about debts, about damage, about the way some people moved through the world absorbing punishment like it was their birthright. He was thinking about his mother's thin wrists and the cigarette scars on her back that she'd hidden under long sleeves even in summer. "Keep her on the radar," he said. "The storm's getting bad. If she's out there tonight, I want to know about it." The call ended. Aleandro turned back to the city, watching the snow come down like the sky itself was trying to erase San Francisco from the map. Somewhere below, a woman in a dying Honda Civic was driving through the dark with everything she owned and nothing that mattered. He did not yet know that she would be the one to teach him what it meant to have something worth keeping. For days had passed since Aleandro pulled her from the frozen highway, and Mia was learning what it meant to exist in a world that did not crush you the moment you stood still. She worked the dinner shift at Bianchi's restaurant on Powell Street, her hands moving with practiced precision through the dinner rush, taking orders, clearing plates, her mind calculating tips and splits with the mathematical certainty of someone who had counted pennies for so long that numbers felt like a language she spoke better than words. The restaurant was all cream marble and soft amber lighting, the kind of place where men in tailored suits discussed business over wine that cost more than her weekly groceries used to cost. Her uniform was simple black and white, but it was clean, pressed, and nobody here looked at her like she was invisible. Emma sat in the back office doing homework at a small desk Aleandro had arranged, supervised by Rosa, who braided her hair and brought her chamomile tea, treating her with a tenderness that made Mia's chest tighten every time she witnessed it. On this 4th night, near the end of her shift, Douglas Hale walked through the restaurant's front door. He was wearing a dark coat streaked with rain, his jaw unshaven, his eyes carrying that familiar gleam of possession and rage. He scanned the dining room methodically, and when his gaze found Mia, something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest. She was holding a wine glass, frozen mid-pour, her hand trembling so slightly that only someone who knew her body the way he did would notice. But Douglas knew her body. He knew every inch of her fear. He walked toward her with the deliberate pace of a man who owned the space around him. The conversations at nearby tables dimmed. Even strangers sensed the shift in air pressure, the way the atmosphere changed when a predator entered a room. "Mia." His voice was soft, almost tender. "You've been hiding from me." She set down the wine glass. Her hands were shaking now, visible to anyone watching. "You need to leave. Emma is my daughter." "Where is she?" "No." The word came out barely a whisper, shattered like glass. "She is not yours. She will never be yours." Douglas moved closer, his hand reaching out, his fingers wrapping around her wrist with the casual cruelty of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "You belong to me. You've always belonged to me. And that daughter, when she gets old enough, when she understands what a whore her mother is." The sentence never finished. Bruno appeared between them like he had materialized from the shadows, though he had been in the kitchen the entire time. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, his movements controlled with the precision of someone trained in violence. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at Douglas with eyes that had seen things that made threats unnecessary. "Your hand," Bruno said. "Remove it from her wrist." Douglas released her. In that moment, facing a man who represented something far larger and infinitely more dangerous than his own cruelty, he made the calculation that his life depended on. He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor like a metronome counting down the hours until his own reckoning arrived. Bruno guided Mia to the back. Aleandro needs to know about this. The call came through before midnight. Aleandro listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each detail. When Bruno finished speaking, there was a silence so complete it seemed to swallow sound itself. "Secure the restaurant. I'm coming to get her." Meanwhile, across the city in Pacific Heights, Rachel Dawson sat at her mahogany dining table, her fingers wrapped around a crystal glass of Sancerre, her mind occupied with the woman who had somehow become an obstacle to her carefully constructed world. She had tried the health inspection route, spreading rumors through the city's social elite, painting Mia as Aleandro's temporary fascination, a kept woman, a charity case, someone without pedigree or breeding. But the rumors had not stuck. If anything, Aleandro's protection had only elevated Mia's status. Society was watching. And society had a habit of forgiving powerful men anything. Rachel needed a different approach. More personal. More permanent. She lifted her phone and made a call to a contact in the police department, someone whose pension she had funded through her foundation's carefully laundered millions. "I have information about a kidnapping," she said. "A woman named Mia Reynolds. She took a child from her father, Douglas Hale. He has a custody agreement." The lie was constructed with surgical precision, built on half-truths that would require investigation to dismantle. By the time the authorities determined the truth, the damage would be done. Aleandro would be forced to choose between his world and her. He would choose his empire. He always did. But Rachel underestimated what Aleandro had become the moment Mia Reynolds stepped into his penthouse with rain in her hair and $78 to her name. At 2 a.m. on the fifth day, 12 men in black tactical gear moved through Douglas Hale's apartment building like ghosts. They breached his door at exactly 2:17 a.m., the sound of the lock breaking sharp and final in the sleeping hallway. Douglas was dragged from his bed by Bruno and Dario, his body thrown against the wall as agents swept the apartment. What they found was worse than anything Aleandro had anticipated. The laptop. The files. 3 years of digital records cataloging his operation with meticulous detail. Douglas Hale was not just a man who beat women. He was a trafficker. A predator who targeted vulnerable women, promised them jobs, then sold them into networks that shipped them overseas. Victim testimonies filled his encrypted folders, women whose names had become commodities with price tags. Shipping manifests. Financial records. A ledger of human suffering converted into profit. And there, in his private journals, the plans for Emma. When she turned 12, he had written, when her body became worth something to the right buyers. 5 years. He had been planning to traffic his own daughter for 5 years while Mia worked double shifts and counted every penny, terrified and alone. Douglas collapsed to the floor, his body trembling like a wounded animal with no escape. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking into a whimper. "I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. I'll leave the country." Aleandro stood above him, his shadow falling across Douglas's face like the blade of an executioner's sword. When he spoke, his voice was ice. "You're right about that. But death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful for a man like this." The Castellano family had been hunting Douglas for 2 years. Their daughter had been one of his victims, trafficked through his network, lost to them in the machinery of his operation. Aleandro made a single phone call. Within 30 minutes, Douglas Hale was loaded into a vehicle and driven into the night, toward a reckoning that no law enforcement agency could provide. He would not be killed. Worse than that, he would be kept alive, conscious, aware of every consequence of his choices, until the Castellanos decided his suffering had balanced the scales. As dawn broke over San Francisco, federal agents in armor swept through Rachel Dawson's mansion in Pacific Heights. They moved through rooms lined with art worth millions, through closets filled with clothes in her size that she would never wear again. The foundation that had made her a beloved philanthropist was exposed as a money laundering operation. The charity galas where politicians and celebrities had smiled at her were fronts for moving millions in drug money, weapons cash, corrupted bureaucracy transformed into spreadsheets and offshore accounts. Aleandro's investigation had given the FBI the final pieces they needed to close a case that had been building for 18 months. Rachel was arrested in her silk nightgown, her face contorted in shock as the handcuffs closed around her wrists. News cameras flashed outside her mansion. The headlines spread like infection through the city's elite. Pacific Heights philanthropist arrested in federal investigation. Foundation exposed as criminal front. 47 counts of money laundering, conspiracy, trafficking, corruption. The society that had celebrated her abandoned her within hours. Donors withdrew. Politicians issued statements distancing themselves. Her lawyers submitted plea agreements that guaranteed minimum security imprisonment for 40 years. By noon, her bank accounts were frozen. Her reputation had been systematically dismantled and scattered like ash across the bay. At her arraignment, she looked into the courtroom gallery and saw Aleandro sitting motionless in the back row, watching her with eyes that held no triumph, no satisfaction, only the certainty of a man who had simply ensured that justice moved in the direction it was always meant to go. Mia sat in the estate garden as afternoon light broke through the clouds, the freezing rain having stopped sometime near dawn. Emma played nearby with a wooden puzzle, her small hands assembling pieces with concentration, her intelligence blooming now that fear no longer consumed the space where her childhood should have been. Rosa stood at the garden door, her expression soft. "It is finished," Rosa said. "Both of them." Mr. Bianchi kept his promise. Mia did not ask for details. She did not need them. She had learned something in these 4 days that she had never understood before. There are different kinds of strength, and some of them wear tailored suits and move through the world with quiet certainty that consequences are a law of nature, not a matter of chance. She stood and walked toward the mansion as the sun emerged fully from behind the clouds, the city spreading below the estate like a geography of second chances she had never thought possible. Emma called out to her, her voice clear and unafraid. "Mama, look. I finished it." The morning sun broke through the estate windows in sharp, golden angles, and Mia stood in the circular driveway unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process what her eyes were telling her. 15 black limousines stretched before her in perfect formation like a funeral procession for her old life, each one gleaming with a shine that cost more than a year of her wages, their chrome catching the light and throwing it back at the sky. The drivers stood in formation beside them, 15 men in pressed black suits and white gloves, their faces expressionless, their posture military rigid. Rosa had called her at the restaurant at 9 in the morning. "Come immediately. Please." That single word, please, had sent Mia's heart into her throat. All she could think was that something had happened to Aleandro, some retaliation, some consequence, some payment extracted in blood. She had driven the car he provided, a silver sedan, nothing flashy, practical, with her hand shaking on the steering wheel, weaving through San Francisco traffic while her mind assembled catastrophes. But when she pulled through the gates and saw the limousines, catastrophe transformed into something she had no word for. Aleandro stood waiting. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been stitched directly onto his body, expensive in that way that made wealth invisible because it looked like nothing other than perfection. Beside him stood Marco in his wheelchair, and behind them both, Bruno and Dario flanked either side like sentinels. The morning air was cold and clean, tinged with salt from the bay below. Mia's legs carried her forward on instinct. Each step felt like walking through water. When Aleandro moved toward her, she saw it then, the gentleness in his eyes, the same gentleness she had glimpsed that night in the snow when he could have turned away and never looked back. He took her hand. His palm was warm. His grip was steady. "You gave everything you had to help my son when he was a stranger to you," Aleandro said, and his voice moved through the morning like a bell tolling slowly. "You asked for nothing. You protected your daughter with courage that I have rarely seen in a lifetime of commanding men who claim to fear nothing. You survived hell itself and remained kind. You remained human when the world gave you every reason to become a stone." He paused. The limousine drivers waited. The city waited. The whole of her broken past waited to see what he would say next. "This is not charity," he continued. "Charity is what the rich give the poor to ease their conscience. This is recognition. This is a man acknowledging a woman who taught him something he thought he was too old to learn." He gestured toward the limousines with a single gesture, economical and absolute. A signal. The 15 drivers moved as one organism, opening the limousine doors in perfect synchronization, a sound like a wave breaking, 15 metallic clicks and the soft hiss of hydraulics. "The first," Aleandro said, turning to face her fully, "contains the deed to a house in the outer Sunset District. 3 bedrooms. Safe neighborhood. Yours. Fully paid. No mortgage. No debt." Mia's hand flew to her mouth. Aleandro continued, his voice steady, relentless in its generosity. "The second contains a college fund. $500,000. In a trust that cannot be touched by anyone except Emma when she turns 18. The third is $75,000 in cash. Your salary for a year, paid in advance, because you are no longer going to survive paycheck to paycheck." Each declaration fell like a weight being lifted from her shoulders, and she could not cry, could not move, could only stand there as the architecture of her future was being rebuilt before her eyes. The fourth limousine contains clothing. Professional wardrobe. Because you are now the manager of Bianchi's restaurant, and you will be treated like someone of significance, because that is what you are. The limousine stretched before her like a miracle made visible. Through the windows she could see shapes, wrapped boxes, gleaming objects, the physical manifestation of all the things she had never dared to want. Her eyes found Marco. He sat in his wheelchair, watching her with an intensity that reminded her that this moment was also his moment, that his father was acknowledging something more than her kindness. Marco rolled forward slightly. "The gifts," Marco said, and his voice carried the steadiness of someone learning to believe in hope again. "The toys and books and bicycle in the next limousines, those are from my father and me. Because every child deserves to know she is safe. Because your daughter deserves to play." Mia felt her throat tighten. She could not speak. Aleandro took her hand again, and this time she did not pull away. "The 11th limousine contains legal documents. Your full custody of Emma is now absolute. Your ex-husband's parental rights have been terminated through channels that left him no legal recourse. He cannot touch her. He cannot reach her. She is yours alone, protected by the same power that protects my family." Something broke inside her chest then. Not breaking into pieces, breaking open, like a seed finally allowed to grow. The 12th limousine contains insurance documents. Premium coverage for both you and Emma. Lifetime. Medical, dental, vision. Everything. Aleandro's grip on her hand tightened. "The 13th contains a letter of recommendation signed by my name. If you ever wish to leave my employ, you can walk into any restaurant in San Francisco and they will hire you on site. You will never be trapped again." She turned to look at him then, and the morning light caught the silver at his temples, the single scar running from his left eye down to his jaw. This man who controlled the city through fear had constructed this entire moment, 15 limousines, 15 drivers, every gift calibrated to address the specific wound she carried. How long had he been planning this? How many conversations with Rosa and Marco had occurred while she slept? "The 14th, he continued, and something shifted in his expression, something almost vulnerable, contained stock certificates. You are now a minority shareholder in Bianchi Enterprises. Your financial future is secured. Your daughter's future is secured. You will never again count pennies while your child sleeps hungry." He released her hand and stepped back. From the inside of his suit jacket, he withdrew an envelope. White. Heavy. The paper so fine it looked like it might dissolve under her fingertips. The 15th limousine door stood open, and inside was nothing but a single red rose and a small box. Aleandro handed her the envelope. His hands were steady. Hers trembled. Inside the envelope was a single handwritten page in dark ink, the script precise and deliberate. She read it once. Then again. Then a third time because she could not believe the words her eyes were seeing, could not believe this man, this king of the underworld, had written these words about her. When Mia looked up from the letter, Aleandro was watching her with an expression that held no expectation, only hope held at a distance, like he was already prepared for rejection. But before she could speak, before she could form the words she needed to say, a school bus turned onto the estate drive. The door opened. Emma appeared, uniform from St. Catherine's, backpack on her small shoulders, her eyes searching until they found her mother. In 4 months, Mia had watched her daughter learn how to smile again, how to laugh without fear, how to exist in space without bracing for impact. But nothing had prepared her for the moment Emma saw the 15 limousines and froze. She ran. Her small feet crossed the driveway in a sprint that made her mother's heart pause. Mia dropped to her knees, and Emma collided with her, arms around her neck, breathing fast. "Mama, what's happening? What are all the cars?" Mia held her daughter as tight as she could without causing pain. "Something good, baby. Finally, something good." She kissed the top of Emma's head and looked up at Aleandro. The word stuck in her throat, caught somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. But he understood anyway. He always seemed to understand. Aleandro stepped forward and extended his hand to Emma. "There are gifts for you inside these automobiles. Very nice gifts. Books you requested. Art supplies. A bicycle. All waiting for your permission to leave the cars." Emma's eyes widened. She looked at her mother. Mia nodded. The child took Aleandro's hand, and he led her toward the limousines, Marco rolling behind them, Bruno and Dario moving like shadows. The neighborhood was beginning to notice. Windows opened. People emerged onto porches. A car slowed as it passed the estate gates. The drivers opened all 15 limousine doors simultaneously. The sound was like a symphony, all the metallic clicks and gasps of hydraulic systems creating a single moment of sound. Inside each limousine, gifts waited. Inside the final limousine, the compass necklace sat in a small black box beside a card that would, eventually, change everything. But in that moment, Mia stood alone for just a second, the morning sun warm on her face, and she thought about the night she had given her last $78 to a stranger in a wheelchair on a snowy roadside. She thought about how small that gesture had seemed at the time, how impossible it had felt to give away money she needed to survive. She thought about how the universe sometimes measures kindness in ways you cannot predict, in limousines and deeds and promises delivered in the morning light. This would not be the end of her story. This would be the beginning. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.